Welcome back to the channel with the Ford Falcon project. If you follow the channel at all, you probably recently saw my rant video, which was instigated by this. And I wanted to talk about these pulleys here for a minute because this was a problem that you might find that you could have. My engine came with these underdrive aluminum pulleys on it. I think it was a kit, had one for the water pump and one for the alternator too. And the problem I had with it was when it was running, this belt would just slip. I mean, it started out slipping a little bit, and within a few times of driving it, the thing was slipping constantly. I couldn't even hardly get off idle with it. And what I determined was it was the crankshaft pulley that was causing the slippage. And I first just thought it was because maybe it was just too polished or the belt didn't fit in there correctly or something. But upon researching it, it turns out that this is apparently a pretty common problem. And the reason for it is the amount of surface area that that belt's going to be on at any given time is going to be significantly smaller, as you can see here. If we just wrap it around that one corner and go to do it on this one, you can tell that there's a massive difference in the amount of coverage that that belt's going to have once it's on the pulley. So this should prevent the slippage problem. This is I think it's a new old stock pulley I got on eBay. Had to research the part number to find the right one because it is a 2-groove. But I did find the right one and I was able to buy that. It was, I think it was around $60 or so for it. I've seen them as high as 90 for ones that are rusty and crusty. So this was a pretty good deal actually on one. It's like it was mounted with one bolt to something, maybe hung on the wall. I don't know. But anyway, we're going to install that and hopefully that will solve our belt squealing problem. Of course, it meant that I had to buy a different size belt and don't know which one it is exactly. So I got two, figure out which one actually fits. But I'm going to install that today, and hopefully that problem will cease to be. Well, of course, nothing is simple. Now the transcooler line is right where the crank pulley wants to be. So we have to move that. Well, some of you might remember in one of the previous installments I talked about the fact that the antenna mast that was broken but just sitting in here loose parted company with the car. So this is all I had left. I cut the cable off because the antenna was bad anyway, and the radio doesn't require it because it's Bluetooth now. But I wanted to replace it because otherwise I got a big hole in the fender, which is no good. So they do reproduce this particular antenna, but it's prohibitively expensive. I think it's up around $90. And at the time I wanted to try to replace it, it wasn't available. So I looked at alternatives because I'm like, this is pretty common how these attach. It's a Ford kind of a corporate thing. It's went up through the 70s, maybe even into the 80s. So what I wound up getting was this telescopic Mustang antenna. And oh, how I have preached that Mustang parts are never the same as Falcon parts when it comes to these cars. And it's true, because if you look at this, you'll see that this is made completely different. This is all manufactured together with the base plate, whereas this one, the base plate is separate. And I thought, okay, how's this go? Does this go in from the bottom and sit on the flange there against the underside of the fender? No, it does not. This will actually fall through the hole in the fender. So it doesn't fit that way. What it does do is you'll notice it's threaded, and it threads into the base plate, which that one does not do. But the base plate has the same spacing and so forth as the original. So it is just a matter of threading this together and then attaching it to the fender, which is fantastic. This is for a 68 to 73 Mustang. There's the part numbers for you. I got this from CJ Pony Parts. And that will be a much more cost-effective replacement. I think this was maybe, I'm trying to remember now, I think it was, I want to say it was like $54 maybe for this one versus the 80 or 90 for the correct one. which you don't need. Now you can get a universal antenna, but I don't care for those because they have the round base and then you don't have this factory arrangement. So to me, it was worth spending that little bit extra. But there you go. There's an alternative to the actual Falcon antenna that will work for you. Here's the antenna on the car, and it looks like it fits perfect. I know these have an angle to them to match the fender, but this one looks like it matches. Looks like it's straight to me. It may not look quite in the camera angle here, but on the car it looks perfectly straight. So I think that is a win. Well, I expected there to be a lot more difference between the new and the old leaf springs, but as you can see here, there really isn't. The arch isn't very much different, and the overall length is about the same. One of the problems with these cars is trying to get rear shocks for them. The only options out there seem to be Monroe and Gabriel, and they're, quite frankly, cheap garbage in my opinion. Very, very bottom-end shock absorbers. You can get KYBs, I think, too, for these cars, but they're a kind of an inexpensive gas shock, and my past experience with those is that they've been too stiff and make the ride really harsh. So somebody else, I can't take credit for this, but somebody else came up with the Bilstein option, and this is the comparable shock to the ones that were on the car. As you can see, the length is pretty much about the same. It's a little longer stud down here, and the body of the shock absorber is much broader. So these are really good quality German-made shocks. And the part number is right there for you if you want. It's the 24- number. And these actually are for a Volvo, an older model Volvo, I think from the 60s actually. So that is what I'm going to put on here. I could have done another pair of Viking coilovers or something, I guess, in the back, but I didn't see the need to spend that kind of money for the rear. So we're going to try these Bilsteins, see how they do, and we'll report back. Okay, apologies for the fan running in the background. That's the heat, because this is the current situation in the garage. It's probably in the teens outside. So we're going to have to let this guy run a little bit here and heat things up today. But I'm working on the disc brake conversion, and here's all the components that go on a side of the car. I believe this is a Scarebird kit. I got this used from another guy in the Forgotten Falcons group who was moving on to something else. So I bought it used. It's not really hardly used at all, but send me everything. I got the brackets and the calipers and so on. And I believe these calipers are some kind of GM caliper. It might be off of a mid-size car. Kind of big. And then there's these very important brackets you need, along with the 5-lug rotor. So essentially that pile of parts, I had to try to figure out how it all went together since I didn't have any instructions and didn't take it apart. But this is what it winds up looking like. This is the left front, and it wasn't super intuitive how it went together as far as that bracket goes, but I did figure it out, and I will I have it just mocked up right now. I'm going to take this apart and then I'll show you how the bracket actually attaches. Well, this is how this bracket attaches, and it uses the original bolts that hold the backing plate on for the drum setup. And it took a little bit to figure out how this all went together, but that's how it would attach. And it fits really well. It looks like a well-engineered piece. Scarebird was the go-to source for a lot of disc brake conversions, and then they went out of business or closed up shop or something for a while, and I think it got purchased by somebody else because I do believe they are back in business again. But this is a fine kit. I have no quarrels with it. Everything fit together really nicely once I figured it out, and so I look forward to enjoying the stopping power of disc brakes versus those wonderful drums that were okay. The 6-cylinder car didn't really go fast enough to warrant needing a whole lot more, but these will obviously be vastly superior. One question I know I'm going to get that I forgot to cover. The spindles or the knuckle or whatever you want to call it on these cars is the same between 6-cylinder and V8 models. So you don't have to change out that upright that the rotor goes onto. That you can reuse. So you don't have to go and source those from another car or anything. It's exactly the same. It takes the same wheel bearings. Nothing to worry about there. Very easy. In doing the disc brake conversion, I got one of these master cylinder kits off of eBay. They're sold by everybody. CJ Pony Parts also sells them. It's got the proportioning valve and bracket that comes with it. This is just a basic Ford master cylinder, but there's a couple of things that I discovered that you might need to know. One is that the studs in the firewall are not really long enough for this setup. The master cylinder and the bracket combined are a little too thick and the nut barely fits on it. So I got some longer ones at the hardware store. They weren't hard to get. The other thing is the master cylinder came with this rod that does not have an eyelet on the end for the pedal. I don't know if the later cars maybe take this, but this is useless. So you're going to have to reuse the old one from your single pot master cylinder if that's what you've got. For the master cylinder, the studs, you'll need ones that are about a ½ inch longer. Sharp-eyed viewers may have spotted this, but I didn't realize it till I went to put the wheel on. These are long studs that apparently the guy that had this disc brake conversion prior to me installed for drag race wheels. So these don't work, and I've got to replace all these studs now with the correct ones. These rotors are for a 68 Mustang, and the studs should be the same for that. All right, a couple of notes about putting this disc brake master cylinder and proportioning valve in. This is the bracket that holds the proportioning valve, and it's hidden underneath there. I'm starting to run the new brake lines. I got this one here on the driver's side done to the front brakes, and I'm working on the one for the passenger side. Now, the brakes for the rear actually attach at the very back here, right in the center of the bracket underneath, and that's a little weird to do. I already had made this other piece that goes across the firewall, replace that because the original was pretty bad. And trying to do that one is probably the most difficult. It has to make a sharp turn as it comes out the back and then run over to that if you want to do it that way. But pretty much any brake line you're going to put on the back of this thing really needs to have that sharp turn coming out of it. Now, originally I bought this adapter to put in the end because it has this larger size fitting that goes into the back of the proportioning valve to adapt it to the smaller size brake line. This, however, wouldn't really work because this moves everything out towards the firewall too far. So what I ended up doing was just using one of the factory Ford fittings that is this size, but uses a standard brake line. And I find these are pretty common on master cylinders. You can just go to the junkyard and snip one off. That's what I did. I had one in my junk box I completely forgot about. So that adapter there will not work. There's just not enough room to use that and the brake line itself. Now on this side, the brake line from the master cylinder comes across the firewall and it goes down to this junction block. And one line goes to the rear and one goes to the right front wheel. And all I did was I capped that off with a pipe plug suitable for brake lines. And then I'm just going to use that junction block and the existing lines to feed the rear brakes. Pretty simple. Okay, the disc brake system is just about finished. I have the master cylinder bench bled and just need to install that and bleed the rest of the system. What I did do was finish the brake lines, and you'll see here We got new lines going to the hoses. These are the hoses that come with the kit, and it's the reverse installation of the factory system. The factory hoses come in from the rear facing side of the car. So I just flip these around because they fit better that way. We run that brake line up and into the original hole. And I'll take you under the car and show you what the rest of it looks like. So what we did here was I ran the brake line in from the factory hole and then down to a junction or a union here. And I'm not really fond of doing this, but there really wasn't a way to make this one piece. So I had to make a junction at some point, so I chose to hide it down in here. And then it runs down and across the cross member. I don't know if you can see it. There it is. And then up the other side. I have two brackets holding it, one on each side. And then it goes up to the master cylinder, which I'll show you up top. And here it simply comes up from the bottom and goes into the proportioning valve there. And then this other line is the one that goes to the left front brake. Same as the other side, basically, just comes in from the reverse angle. These two lines go to the master cylinder. And then we have the rear brakes coming off the very back, which you can't see here. As I explained earlier, it's kind of a weird arrangement. But then I just plumbed that into the factory style line that runs across the firewall and down to that junction block, which I plugged. And that's going to be it for this installation. I'm going to finish up the brakes, get the car back on the ground, get the wheels mounted up, and then you'll be able to see it on the ground outside with its new wheels and tires. And we'll take it for a drive, hopefully. Right now it's winter and all the roads are salt covered, so it's going to be at least another week until I can get around to that. But I'm going to finish this video and put it up a while so everybody has something to watch and I can clean up my recordings and get ready for the next installment. But we'll do the wheels and tires in the next installment and see how the disc brakes work. Until then, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.